I'm Carmine Gallo with Terry Szuplat, former White House speechwriter for someone you might have heard about, Barack Obama. If you'd like to learn to sharpen your public speaking skills, this is the conversation that you need to listen to. And the book that you need to read is Terry's new book, Say It Well. Terry, I've written books on communication and leadership and public speaking, but from different angles, different experiences, of course. So I have read everything on the subject. I have to say that Say It Well will have a permanent spot on my bookshelf, and it'll be a constant reference. It's not a derivative book. It adds so much to the topic of public speaking. That's new and fresh.
Great. No, this is fantastic. And
Good.
by the way, I've read other books too.
I love it.
So I enjoyed yours quite a bit, and I read it. You would appreciate this. I wanted to kind of know what was out there because I was like, what can I do that's different? And so I read yours, I read others, and then the more I read, I realized I had so many voices in my head. I was like, I think I have too many voices going on right now. I need to sort of revert back to, again, the story that only I could tell. There's lots of different ways to come at this, and I was trying not to be duplicative, and so. If I read, there were a number of times where I said, I wrote an anecdote, and that's a lot like what he wrote. So the audience doesn't need to hear it again. My editor was telling me I had to trim anyways. So you gave it to him. I didn't need to give it to him again.
I could see why it's complimentary. As I was reading your book, Say It Well, I could pick up on a lot of some of the tactics, maybe are ones that I've written about regarding how to give a TED-style presentation. Right. Or when I identified what Steve Jobs did well or what Jeff Bezos did well, but not from your perspective. So it reinforced what I have written about, but it added so many new layers. It is not just another public speaking book. Right. It has an incredibly unique perspective that few other people have. You make an extraordinary admission at the beginning of your book that I think will make a lot of people feel better about themselves. You write, I was a speechwriter who couldn't seem to hack it as a speech giver. Just the idea of speaking in front of a group of people left me racked with anxiety. Okay, so people, you are not alone. You are not alone. Just about everyone has some anxiety about public speaking, even the guy who wrote speeches for Barack Obama. So thank you for making that admission at the beginning, Terry. But why did you decide to reveal your own challenge with public speaking?
Well, one of the things that I realized that this is a fear and anxiety that a lot of people have for a lot of different reasons. And you can kind of dig deep to figure out where your anxieties come from. But I wanted people to know that it's something you have to work at. It's something you have to get better at. It's a skill. It can be a learned skill, and we can all get better at it. And, I just felt that one of the reasons I wrote the book is because, I spent all those years writing for President Obama and for others. So I knew how to write a speech. But then when I left the White House and suddenly had opportunities to speak myself, I tried it out. And sometimes it went well, as I write in the book, and sometimes it did not go well. And I write about some of those stories. And so it's not like I was terrible and I could never do it, but but it got to the point where there was so much anxiety around it. I just stopped doing it. I, made up excuses why I couldn't speak at an event. And then I finally had an opportunity to give a big speech. Someone invited me to give, a big keynote address to hundreds of people. And I almost said no. I thought, well, I was almost 50 years old. I'm going to keep hiding from this thing that scares me my whole life. And I thought, or maybe I could just try to remember what I was doing for President Obama and other people all those years and kind of reverse engineer it and just think deeply. What was I doing? Maybe I could do it myself. And that's the book. The book are the sort of the lessons I kind of relearned from my own journey of trying to become a better speaker. And even just doing an interview like this, 5 years ago, I'm not sure I could have done it. I mean, it brings up, public speaking brings up a lot of anxiety for people. So I'm not perfect. I'm not where I want to be. I'm trying every day to get better, but I'm better than I was. And I think I've tried to share those lessons in the book.
Why do you believe that the art of public speaking is more important today than ever before?
Mainly because our voices can travel farther than ever before, particularly because of social media. right? Everywhere we go, in our classrooms as young people and students, our town meetings, our company meetings, everything gets recorded, whether we realize it or not. And then it gets shared. And I tell a lot of stories in the book, not just of working at the White House, but just folks all over the country and all over the world who've given amazing presentations and speeches. And some of them, they just got up at their local town meeting to speak, and they spoke passionately. They spoke from the heart. They thought no one would ever hear it. Somebody was recording it, and it went viral, and millions of people heard it. And so, and there's both opportunity and, as we know, danger in that. I think, particularly in the business world, one wrong misstatement, one wrong step, it can ruin your career. So I think it's more important than ever that we think deeply about what we're saying, how we're saying it, how we're communicating with other communities that may be different from us. And I try to capture all that in the book.
You wrote speeches for President Obama across all 8 years of his presidency, and you joined him on trips to more than 40 countries, from what I recall. Right. That's extraordinary, because you had this amazing front row seat to the inner workings and habits of a person widely considered to be one of the great communicators of our time. So Barack Obama did not simply read the words that you wrote. A lot of your book about public speaking is what you learned from Obama. What are some of the top line habits or tactics that Obama taught you?
Yes, I think one of the most important lessons, and I think this can help people deal with some of the anxieties and fears around public speaking, is I think, and he told me this, because I asked him once, I said, what do you think makes a great public speaker? And he said, I think great public speaking begins when someone knows who they are. I love this. Knows who they are, knows what they believe, and speaks from a place of their core convictions. And the reason that always sticks with me is because I think every day where we see political leaders, business leaders in all spaces, and you're listening to them and you just have a gut sense as you hear them, I'm not sure they truly believe what they're saying right now. And it's because I don't think they've gone through the process of actually asking themselves big questions like, and there's a point I list out 10 questions I think we should all ask each other before we get up and speak to another audience, before we get up and ask them to believe in us. We have to know who we are, what we believe, what our values are, what we're working for, particularly in the business world. Is it just about a service? Is it just about a product? Or are we working and representing a larger set of values that will bring customers in and bring partners in? As you've written, some of the great business leaders of all time, they're not just selling a product, they're a service, they're selling a worldview, they're selling a value system. And so you only know these things if you think deeply about them. And so I think the biggest lesson that I learned from President Obama was that you just have to know who you are. And I think once you do that, once you this is beyond public speaking, right? This is just sense of self. Once you're comfortable and confident in who you are, it's much easier to get up and then share that with an audience. The whole book is one of the things I'm very grateful for is that I'm sharing a lot of the conversations I had with him over those 8 years about public speaking. And so I hope the reader feels like, at every page they're kind of having a conversation with Barack Obama too, whether you agreed with his politics or not. That's sort of beside the point. I tried to take the politics out of this book. I want everybody to be able to learn from this, because I was very lucky to have a front row seat to one of the great orators of our time, and I learned from it, but why should we be the only ones? Why not? I want to share these lessons with people.
That's why I think your book is so valuable, because it is a front row seat to an experience that no one else is going to have. That's extraordinary, and it's unique. And there's so many things that we can learn from great orators. But I like the idea of articulating something persuasively. So let's talk about a tool that is out there right now that is helping people articulate. Your book on public speaking is coming out at an interesting time when ChatGPT and AI can now do a lot of the writing for us. Let's look at writing in particular, because you were the speechwriter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can harness the power of this technology without losing our unique voice. AI, ChatGPT, writing, where does that leave us?
Right. So yeah, I started writing this book, and then what was it? November 2022, this thing pops into the world called ChatGPT. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. What does this mean? Throughout the book, I have these little asides, when to ask a bot and when not to ask a bot, when to bring them in and when not to. And I think, for me, it comes down to two big ideas. One is that I hope that if you have to stand up in front of an audience of any kind, 5 people, 500 people, or 5,000 people, and you want to have a human experience, you want the humans in the audience to connect with you, the human speaker. I hope no one ever kind of turns that over to a chatbot and asks a chatbot to write that presentation, that speech. When we get up in front of, you can let them read an article, let them read an essay, let them, when you get up to give a presentation, the audience wants you. They want your voice. They want your authentic experiences. They want what's in your heart. They want to know what you're feeling. If they wanted just facts and numbers and figures, they could go read that in an article. So I'm using this book to appeal to people that, as this technology develops, don't ever give your voice over to a bot. It's one of the most powerful things we have in our world is our voice and our story and our experiences. That's what moves and connects people. So don't ever do that. Now, for research, for editing, as a thought partner, as a co-pilot, oh, absolutely. I use it that way all the time. I'll say, give me 20 quotes about freedom and justice, or, I'll take 1,000-word text and drop it in and ask it to cut it to 500, just to see what it thinks could go without losing the essence of the argument. I often don't use it because it's just so choppy. But it's a useful thought partner. So instead of maybe walking down the hall to your busy coworker, maybe you'll do some of this through chat. And I think that's fine. But again, the biggest takeaway, gosh, I hope no one ever gets up to give a eulogy to their grandparent or their parent and uses something that they wrote on chat, or best, toast at the wedding. That's not what we want. That's not, and I pray we never lose that humanity.
You have a tactic that you've written about called the 50-25-25 rule. You suggest spend 50% of your time thinking, researching, organizing your thoughts, 25% of your time writing, and the final 25% of your time editing and practicing. Okay, so I think I get it. Let's break it down. You say this works no matter how much time you have. So let's take one example, a presentation. You have to give a presentation, big mission-critical presentation. In front of, there'll be board members there, maybe stakeholders, investors. So you're a little nervous about it, but thankfully I have a month.
Right.
Now, of course, we don't want to wait until the last few days. So
Right.
Using this 50-25-25 rule, how would I go about allocating my time?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons that I use this and that I teach it to my students at American University, and that I always encourage my clients to do it, is because I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make as speakers, as communicators, as writers, is the moment we find out about the presentation, the assignment, we panic. And I get it. We look, a blank screen, a white screen, a blank page, sort of the cursor sort of blinking at us, taunting us. It can be unnerving. It's terrifying. And so for I think a lot of people, the instinct is, I'm just going to start writing right now. And I've seen this over and over again. I'm going to write, and I've worked with people who, they can bang out a great opening page or two, and then inevitably it's, I don't know where I'm going next. I don't know what comes next. What is this about? I mean, how many times have your viewers been in meetings where, we're looking at a script and someone's reading the script halfway through and go, what are we doing here? Where are we going? What is this about? Because this feels like it's about it. So the whole point of this is to just sort of let everybody relax. If you have a big assignment coming up, you don't have to start producing content, the slide presentation, the deck, the script, the speech right away. Give yourself some space and some grace. And so, if you had a big presentation coming up in a month, just relax. Take those first 2 weeks to think deeply about what you want to say, what you're trying to accomplish. Have your meetings, do your research, start playing around with an outline, but don't force your team, particularly if you're a CEO or a business leader. Don't just say, hey, I want that speech on my desk tonight at 5:00. Maybe it's 5 weeks from now. Only then, that's when you do some of the best ideas will come to you if you build in space to be creative and be thoughtful. So
I love it.
I'm actually called a speechwriter. I spend more of my time researching and thinking than I do writing.
See, that's amazing. I don't think people understand that. They think that, oh, you're a writer, you're a speechwriter, you get right to the speech and you start writing. No, not necessarily. I love the fact that you remind all of us, take that time to think, research, organize, assemble your assets, assemble your stories, see where you want the flow to be, maybe even start an outline. But take that 50% of the time to think, research, organize your thoughts, which would mean that 25% of my time, so maybe 1 week on the writing, I'm still using that example of giving a presentation in a month. So 1 week on writing it, actually putting my thoughts on paper, assembling it, editing, that whole bit.
Writing your speech, building your slide deck, only after you've done all that heavy, hard thinking where you know what your message is, you've boiled it down, you know the argument you're trying to make, you know the outcomes you want. And then the last part, is build another big mistake that I think a lot of people make, particularly in the business world where time is of the essence. Too many people don't build in time to edit and practice. There's sort of hey, I'm giving this presentation tonight at 6:00. It's 4 p.m. Let me know what you think. Well, 2 hours is not enough. No one in the organization feels comfortable saying, this is terrible, because there's no time to make it better. But when you build in this case, your example, a whole week to circulate it, share it, get feedback, including honest, candid feedback that maybe this is not the right direction, you still have time to make it better. You still have time to practice. And it just, I think, again, so this works whether you've got a month, it works whether you've got a week, it works whether you've got a few hours.
Practicing up to a week, right?
Sure.
Most people wait until the last. Well, first of all, Terry, let's be honest, most people don't practice at all effectively the way they should, which is out loud, going through the whole presentation. So you're recommending give it a week, not only to get feedback, but also to practice going through it.
Really get comfortable with it. I'm glad you mentioned that. I read about that. I've had clients, I've worked with people. I said, have you reviewed the draft? Oh, yeah, I've read it a few times. I'm good with it. No. Have you read it out loud? Have you said it out loud? And I do this with my students. I just had a class the other day, and they said, I was so proud of my draft. I read it out loud, and, all sorts of things popped out. Words were harder to say than I realized. It didn't come out the right way. So once you practice out loud, you realize, better that you find out now in the privacy of your own, office than in front of a crowd. And the more you practice, the more you internalize the speech. I mean, there's a whole debate whether you should try to memorize a speech or not. But, most people don't get up and read prepared speeches, but even when you're not going to read it word for word, I still recommend that people write it out word for word, because that's how you can practice it.
I have written books on Steve Jobs and on TED Talks, how to give a TED style presentation. I've reached the conclusion, which I'm sure you have as well, that great communicators are made. They're not born. They work at it. And like any skill, as you say in your book, like any skill, public speaking is a skill and it can be sharpened and improved. This brings up the question, because you work directly with Barack Obama, one of the great speakers of our time. Does time and practice apply to somebody like him?
It applies to everybody, everywhere. Okay. I'm so glad you asked that. There's this phrase out there.
And would he accept this, Terry? Would he acknowledge it?
And he talks about it in the book, and I share it in the book, and that's one of the first chapters is, there's a phrase out there. That person is a naturally gifted speaker. A lot of people have said that about Barack Obama, because what they remember is 42-year-old Barack Obama coming out at the 2004 Democratic Convention and giving kind of a speech for the ages.
I believe that we have a righteous wind at our backs, and that as we stand on the crossroads of history, we can make the right choices and meet the challenges that face us.
Well, I tell the story, when I was working with him, he told me, there was a time I was giving a speech as a young man in my 20s, and I froze up. And I thought, wow, Barack Obama froze up giving a speech, because we've all been there. We've all at one time or another felt that. So I want to know, okay, how do you go from someone who froze up in your 20s to someone who gave that speech and is the orator we know today? So I asked him, and he told me the story of how he got better and how he worked to get over certain, bad habits, as he said, that he had. And I tell that story in the book in one of the first chapters. And I do that because I want people to know that There is no such thing as a naturally gifted speaker. There's no such thing as a naturally gifted singer. You have to learn, you have to practice, you have to get better. You have to get your reps in over and over and over again. And I share that because I want people to know that, Barack Obama got better. You can get better. We can all get better if we practice, if we apply, again, it's like any skill. And I try to lay out those skills in the book.
Take me back to Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. On the night he loses the New Hampshire primary, he gives a speech that becomes one of the most memorable of his career. And he said that Americans have always responded to moments of challenge with a simple creed. It was a creed written into the founding documents
that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed a trail towards freedom through the darkest of nights. Yes, we can.
When you see it written, it fails to capture how Obama actually delivered it, doesn't it?
Right.
Tell us the difference between the written speech and the delivery and what we as business leaders and entrepreneurs are supposed to take away from that lesson.
Sure. So I tell this story in the book. I have a chapter called Make It Sing, which is for speechwriters is often the worst thing you want to hear from your client, because all they say is, well, just make it sing. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, how do you want it to sing? But what I was trying to get at there is, yes, when you look at a speech, any speech by anybody on a piece of paper, it can never capture the full essence of that speech, how it was actually delivered, how it was received by the audience, that experience of a speaker, and again, human speaker with a human audience. We all know what that feels like when we're in it and when we're having it. So what I do in the book is I kind of, rewrite, I take the speech and I kind of lay it out like a poem, like a song, because that's how it was actually delivered. And in fact, will.i.am actually turned it into a song. And so it's actually interesting. The reason I do that is because I want to show people that there's actually a really easy way you can make your speeches more rhythmic and lyrical if you want to. Not every speech lends itself to that. But when you see a speech as more of a performance, more of a song, more of a poem, all of a sudden right there on the page, you can see where the refrains are, where the long sentences are and where the short sentences are. So this is another technique that I teach my students. And, the day I teach it to them, you can just see it in their eyes. But yeah, I'm not writing an essay. I'm not writing a report. I'm writing a song. I'm writing a poem. I'm writing something to be heard, right? Speeches are meant to be heard first and foremost. We listen to them, we watch them. And so this is a technique for how all of us can write presentations of any kind that can be heard and processed better.
Let's be clear and tactical. When you say write like a poem, I believe you're saying write it like a script. Every new sentence starts on the left margin, and there's a space between each line. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I sort of actually lay it out in the book just because it's a hard thing to explain, but I lay it out what it looks like. And yeah, imagine for your viewers right now, when you see a poem, when you see a song, it's written in stanzas and verses. Mm-hmm. And you can add a blank space. It just helps break out, and you can break it out where your breaths are. So if a long sentence you might have a few breathing spots in there. You might break that sentence down over the course of a few lines.
Well, Terry, thank you for helping us to say it well and deliver it well and to write it well. Appreciate it. Wonderful book. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.